Hi, everybody. We are shifting to mental illness now and mental health. Let's put it that way. This might be separated again into two different lectures with some items to do. I am going to ask you, if you did not watch the anxiety video before this, to go do it. Go watch it right now. I tried to make that clear. It's just a few minutes, maybe 2 minute video. If you could watch that and then come back, it'd be great. And if you already watched it, what did you think? I'm hoping that you recognized it a little bit. If you're watching me right now and you've never had anxiety in your life, it may not have spoken to you. If you've had some, or you've had just even that self-talk that's negative inside, you probably recognized it. And mental illness is a spectrum. It goes from having some anxiety before you have to give a speech, and the rest of the day you feel fine, to being absolutely crippled with anxiety or depression or psychosis. So we're all somewhere on there, and I just wanted to touch a little bit of it with that. There has clearly always been mental health and mental illness as long as there's been humankind. The difference is that we live longer today in society, so there are more people who struggle with it, and the more people who struggle with it, the more we have learned to talk about it. And what's even better is, the longer we have lived and centuries have passed by, we have medical and psychological treatments today, which allows us to go ahead and talk about mental health and illness even more, because there's solutions to it. Unfortunately, and that's something that we'll need to talk about and think about as social workers, there is still a stigma out there. We have not completely gotten this to the point where we treat mental illness the way we do a heart condition, diabetes, or cancer. We don't even second guess people getting treatment for those things. In fact, we encourage people to get treatment for that. So, what is mental health? As opposed to mental illness, mental health is that sense of being physically, emotionally well, having satisfying relationships with people, having a sense of self worth and self competence, being able to tolerate the stressors of life. A person is able to readily contribute to their family, to their job, to society when they're feeling mentally healthy. We, generally speaking, don't even notice that someone isn't mentally well until it's gone, right? We just take each other for granted that everybody's okay until we meet someone who is struggling. And that's when we realize that there's a mental health problem. But I wanted to give you some statistics. 26% of our entire population has something we would consider to be a mental illness. That's a diagnosable mental illness. 44% of the country is not really well mentally. Maybe they haven't gone to get a diagnosis yet, but if they went, there might be something there. 6% has what's called SPMI, a serious and persistent mental illness. Schizophrenia, psychosis, paranoid schizophrenia, major severe bipolar depression. All right. And everybody else probably has an issue. So when you add up all those statistics, 26 and 44 and 6, and then the ones that are probably having an issue, we're hit 100%. So again, everybody is out there with these problems. And social workers are unique. If you are a bachelor's level social worker, you might be delivering some group therapy, maybe even some crisis therapy. You might be handling a warm line on the phone as a bachelor's degree in social work. If you have a master's, you can go so far as to have private clients. You can work in an agency that deals with mental health, and they will bill insurance for things. So once again, we got to stop at that history. Back in 1841, Dorothy Dix was the first social worker who kind of brought attention to the fact that there was mental illness. She went and visited all of those almshouses I've talked about, where they have put people who were not well, that either had tuberculosis, illnesses, or had mental illness. And she wrote a 35-page report to the governor of Massachusetts, and she chronicled all the things she had seen there. People living in boxes, people being chained up, bodies that had taken on the form of the cage or box that they had been in, people that were naked, frostbitten. She found horrendous conditions throughout Massachusetts, and that led to changes. Other states also asked her to come. Canada asked her to come, and she did tours there as well. And this did clean up some of the hospitals that were dealing with the mentally ill. The Civil War came, that just made everything go awry. The Industrial Revolution kind of threw things off a kilter, and it may have gone back to as bad as it was. But if you've ever watched the movie A Mind That Found Itself, there's another version of that movie as well. Clifford Beards, in I think it was the early 1900s, 1905, 1908, around then, he was a professor, a very smart man. He lost his mental health, became mentally ill, went into those hospitals. He managed to get better, and afterwards he went out and he chronicled what was happening out there. He helped to get a national movement going on it. Here he was, a Harvard graduate, and had experienced mental illness. The importance of social workers and developing rapport with clients came with someone that, if you go all the way to your master's, you'll hear about, Mary Cannon. She was the one who discovered that social workers who weren't just friendly visitors, weren't just taking information in, but developed a rapport with clients, were able to help them with mental illness. And that even became important for psychologists to know that having that rapport was important. Mary Richmond is also recognized. She recognized the impact that the environment can have on mental illness, whether that was poverty or difficulty living in an inner city, um, alienation from people who were living far out in rural areas. The next thing that happened historically was World War One. If you've studied it all, you know that there were horrendous post-traumatic stress events that happened to those soldiers that went in World War One. And when they came back, they used to call it shell shock. There wasn't a lot of psychologists, even though Freud was out there then. So a lot were referred to social workers, especially if they ended up in some kind of a mental hospital. They would work with social workers. Again, later World War II came, and that got even deeper for social workers. We started to grow even more because, again, the military came back, and there was a lot of men and some women struggling with post-traumatic stress disorder issues. And one of the things they found was there weren't that many people that were trained to deliver psychology, and there were a lot of people who were in need of help. So social workers came in, and they became the secondary line after psychologists. Even today, mental veterans hospitals have probably one of the highest percentage of social workers working with mental health and mental illness in them. The next big jump in mental illness and mental health comes with JFK. JFK, the President John Kennedy, when he took office, he made this a priority, and he came up with what is known as the Mental Health Community Mental Health Construction Act of 1963. And so this idea was that there would be access to mental health for everyone in a community, and it would be divided by population. So each community would get a certain amount of money based on their population. Interestingly, Bucks County was still getting money when I took office in 2008 based on the population of 1968. So that was one of the problems. Nobody wanted to add more money to it, so they just kept the figures where they were apparently in 1968. But this was the very first time that the whole government was saying, all right, there's a problem out there, and we're going to create a place where people can deal with it. The next thing that came about was a big jump in 1979 by a group called NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness. We have a big NAMI group here in Bucks County. Thinking maybe some of you have heard of it or been involved with it, I strongly encourage you to go there if you need support, whether you have someone in your life who has a mental health issue or you're struggling. They're just a wonderful support. And they became the first advocacy group for people who had mental health issues. It was started by parents, I think it was two mothers, of mentally ill students, and they turned this into a nationwide movement, and they got all kinds of laws passed. The Mental Health Bill of Rights got passed by the 80s. They got continuum of care, which means that you would go from a hospital to outpatient, or hospital to partial to outpatient. They got those kind of things passed. There was a Mental Health Parity Act that came in 1996 and then was tightened up in 2008. What that said was that if a company offers insurance to take care of your medical health, they had to offer insurance to take care of your mental health. That used to be very rare. You could very rarely find it. Now you can find that easier than you can find dental care. And then in 2008, it was increased to say there had to be parity. So you couldn't have a $20 copay for medical and a $100 copay for mental health from if you had insurance. It had to be consistent. And if they limited you to a certain amount of medical visits a year, they could limit you to that many mental health visits. Otherwise, that couldn't happen. So one of the big things that I need to talk about now is what we'll call the deinstitutionalization of mental illness. This is a big thing to understand because it is still impacting us today. And I can say I kind of lived through this, so I can testify to the impact it had. So, Ronald Reagan was governor of California. And when he was governor of California, he got involved with a community support group. And they built like recovery homes, sort of, and group homes for people who had serious and persistent mental illnesses or even temporary serious mental illnesses who couldn't really live on their own and could live in community arrangements. He was able to close the majority of the state mental hospitals in California because they had created so many community, like community group homes for people to live in. And the group that did this for him also gave him a lot of political money, and they gave him a lot of support then when he ran for president in 1980. The problem was when you are trying to develop a continuum of care of group homes and hospitals and whatnot in the state of California, it is more manageable than the entire United States. So he thought when he became president, this group was going to be able to help him lead that in the United States. They were not. It's just too big of a problem. But he went ahead and ordered that mental hospitals basically be closed throughout the country. Some of you may remember, or your families may remember, a place called Byberry. That was one of the places that Pennsylvania had. It was in Northeast Philadelphia. It's been mostly torn down now and built over, and I think they have actually a Halloween thing there still sometimes. The other place was Norristown. Norristown State Hospital is still there, but now it is strictly a hospital for people who are in jail and have a mental health illness. You cannot get in there anymore if you have depression or suicidal ideation or anything. There are still small hospitals out there. Locally, it would be Horsham, Foundation's Behavioral Health, Brook Glen. So there are still Princeton House. There's still a few out there, but these are smaller treatment hospitals for a few weeks, not long-term hospitals. So it was around 1982, 83 when Ronald Reagan opened the doors virtually on these mental hospitals and let everybody out. And I remember it. I was in social work school at the time. And these people would come out and they had their life belongings in a bag. Well, they became the homeless. There was nobody out there with treatment plans or anything for them, and they became the true homeless we see today. We have never recovered from that. We have never come up with enough group homes and treatment facilities that are short-term, long-term, medium-term to take care of these people. And so, if you have a mental health problem and you can't hold a job, you are sooner or later likely to end up in that same predicament, and we've just never recovered. So more and more is trying to be done today, but we can talk about this a little bit more, but I can tell you as a commissioner, when we try to open group homes like that for people who might have needed to stay in a hospital for their life, but are out in the community, Reagan was right. If you have the facilities in your community, people don't have to stay in the hospital, but we just didn't have group facilities. And when we try to do them today, of course, the neighbors all come out. They call that NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard, NIMBY. Because nobody wants to have anything near them. They don't want anybody who's mentally ill or a recovery house or a mental health group home near them. So we continue to struggle with that. We continue to try to figure out, what are we going to do? I want to give you the numbers on this so you can see. In 1955, there were 500,000 people in mental hospitals across this country, serious persistent mental illness. By 1981, with Ronald Reagan, there were 125,000. So, right, a fifth of the people, something like that, are out on the street. Most of the people, three quarters and plus, are out on the streets. They are no longer in these institutions, which is good. A lot of times they are just roaming around, though. This is something that we're going to have to think about in the future, because everybody wants to do something about homelessness. Everybody wants to do something about mental illness now, but we've got to break into that idea that every community is going to have their part on this. Um,